You're listening to 3 in 30 Takeaways for Moms, and this episode is sponsored by Vionic Shoes, wearable well-being for your feet. My friends, how is your August going? I'm hoping for a few low-key weeks before school starts for my kids. One can dream, right? But I can't complain because earlier this summer I got to go on a trip to Europe, and it was incredible. I bought the Winnie sneakers from Vionic Shoes because I wanted to be able to wear dresses that were lightweight and fashionable, but I also knew that I would be walking a lot. And these sleek and simple white leather sneakers were the perfect answer. Since I've gotten home, I've found myself continuing to reach for my Winnie sneakers for summer outings and walks because they are so comfortable and much more fashionable than my typical athletic sneakers. No matter your style, Vionic has such a great selection of comfortable shoes for every occasion. Use code 3 in 30 at checkout for 15% off your entire order at www.vionicshoes.com when you log into your account. That's code 3 in 30 at checkout for 15% off your entire order at vionicshoes.com when you log into your account. One-time use only, Vionic Shoes, wearable well-being for your feet. Welcome to 3 in 30, a podcast to help you feel more like yourself within your motherhood. Each 30-minute episode features 3 actionable takeaways to help you become a more self-assured mom, someone who knows yourself, honors your needs, and loves your people. Listen in to feel encouraged as we learn together how to overcome overwhelm and find more magic in motherhood. I'm your host, Rachel Nielsen. I'm so glad you're here. The mental load of motherhood is heavy, and I am always looking for ways to lighten it. Can you relate? A surprising discovery I've made throughout the years is what a dramatic difference knowing and voicing my values can make in lightening my mental load as a mom. But what exactly are values, and how do we go about articulating them? I was really happy to have the opportunity to discuss this when I was interviewed for the Happy Mom Summit put on by JoAnn Crohn of the No Guilt Mom podcast. And I'm so grateful that she gave permission for me to re-air the audio of that conversation here on my podcast. Just a little plug for JoAnn's amazing work. You can find her podcast at No Guilt Mom, and in addition to her weekly podcast, she usually hosts 2 free online summits per year where she brings together dozens of incredible speakers, so keep an eye on her work if you'd like to tune into something like that. Today you'll hear the audio from my interview with her for the summit that she put on last March, and I hope the takeaways I share here will be so helpful for you as you manage the mental load going into back-to-school season. You'll hear about this in the presentation, but I wanted to mention here as well that you can download my free workbook all about articulating your unique values by going to 3in30podcast.com/values. So if you want to really take action on the 3 takeaways from this episode, your first step is to download that workbook. I truly believe that voicing your values can dramatically lighten the mental load of busy mothers. So with no further ado, here's my conversation all about that with JoAnn Crohn from the Happy Mom Summit.
When someone asks you what's important to you, are you just at a loss for words? Because in this busy season that we're all in, everything sounds important. But you know what can help? Figuring out your values. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about in our session today. So, hey, I'm JoAnn Crohn. I'm your host of the Happy Mom Summit, and I'm so excited to introduce you to the incredible Rachel Nielsen. Rachel is the host of the top-ranked parenting podcast, 3 in 30 Takeaways for Moms. In each 30-minute episode, she offers 3 actionable takeaways for moms who want to overcome overwhelm and find more magic in motherhood. She lives in the mountains of Idaho with her husband, her dog, and her 2 miracle children who joined their family through adoption and IVF. So welcome, Rachel.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to connect with you again because we've had great conversations in the past, both on the No Guilt Mom podcast and when I came on 3 in 30. And
Mhm.
you're just a joy to talk to. I've looked forward to this interview actually all day.
Well,
So
thank you. Likewise. I love what you're putting together for moms, and it's just really inspirational. I'm glad to be a part of it.
let's dig into things. When we talk about values, to you, what are values exactly?
So, values are simply what is most important to you in life. And these are not religious principles, these are general, universal sort of traits of living that are the things that deep down in your core that resonate with you and make you want to get out there and live. And so some examples of values are things like creativity, fairness, spirituality, integrity, beauty, activism, peace, thrift, productivity, work ethic, excellence. So if you think about that list of words, they're not, sometimes we'll hear people say, like, oh, she has good values. And that's not what I'm talking about today. It's not like moral things of whether someone is a good or bad person. Values are morally neutral. They're just the principles of living that matter most to you. And so, like my 5 core values are contribution, simplicity, integrity, adventure, and what is my 5th one? Compassion. Compassion. And I like to keep them top of mind and sort of see my life through the lens of these 5 attributes of living that matter most to me. And all values matter, but what matters most to you is the question that can really change your life once you get really clear on that.
I love that, and I love how you just, like, distinguish between these are not moral judgments, these are just simply what you're living by, because I think when we think of values, we think that we have to choose the right values. Like, we need
Mm,
to make sure that we are choosing the right things that other people also value in us, and it becomes this really, really hard decision process if we get into that overthinking kind of frame of mind.
oh,
But
yeah.
actually values operate completely differently
Mm.
because you say that they help reduce the mental load. How does that work?
Yeah. So I have taught a lot of women. I have a program called Self Assured Motherhood. It's a 9-month long program. And the very first unit that we do is voice your values because it's that important. And so I've taught a lot of women about values. And you're so right, JoAnn, that they have a lot of feelings about it. Like they feel
Yeah.
guilty if they don't have a certain value, or they feel guilty if they do. Like a
Mhm.
common one that women feel guilty for having is beauty, and they
Mm.
think like, "Oh, that's so superficial. I shouldn't care about that." And I have to push back and say, there is nothing wrong with having a high value for beauty and wanting your physical spaces to be beautiful, wanting to create beauty in the world, wanting to put together beautiful events and experiences for your family and friends, wanting to dress in a way that makes you feel beautiful. Like there's nothing morally wrong with that, but we
Mm.
have added a lot of moral value to that. I think a lot of people feel like they should have a value for like thrift, that they should care about saving money when really they just kind of don't. And
Yeah,
and so
I get that. Yes.
yes. So when you can get clear on what actually are my values that matter most to me, it can dramatically help lighten your mental load as a mom, which I know
Yeah,
is something that you spend a lot of time and work helping your community to do. The mental load is so real.
it
And
is
when
so
you can
real.
clarify your values, you can start to use them as a lens in your life to start making decisions and seeing things through them. And it can really lighten that mental load. I think of mental load as kind of 3 things. I think of mental load as an over full schedule, too
Mm.
many decisions to make, and too much mom guilt. And values can help with all 3 of those.
I could totally see that because if you're thinking that you have to have thrift as a value and you already have this overblown schedule and you're like, "Oh, now I have to add like coupon clipping to my daily thing," or now I have to go find the best deals at the grocery store and I'm not doing that. And so then comes all of the guilt. But
Mhm.
if you can let that go as something that's not important to you, I mean, there goes like so many things off of your plate.
Oh,
And,
totally.
like, what you said before about having those values that you kind of feel like you shouldn't have,
Mm,
one of mine that I always push back against, like, internally, is I have this value of significance. I wanna make
mm,
sure that I have a contribution to the world and I am doing something that matters. And a
mm,
lot of times, I know, especially for women, you're not supposed to stand out. You're not supposed
mm.
to, like, be
You're not
bold.
supposed to say out loud that, like, you really want to feel significant. Like, it's like, "Isn't that
Yeah.
prideful?" Well, no, it's not. But we shove these things down and don't want to acknowledge them, that these are strong values to us.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about the schedule first. How can values help you navigate an overfull schedule?
Yeah, so you can use your values once you've identified them, and we're going to talk about that at a little later because you might hear this and think, this is all great, but how do I figure out what my values are? We'll get to that.
Mhm.
First, let me tell you why it's helpful to even find your values. One is it can lighten your schedule. The reason why is you literally start using these values as a lens. So I have women in my programs write them down, put them on their computer, put them in their planner, whatever they are. And when they start to feel overwhelmed by their schedule, I ask them, look at your values and ask yourself if what's on your calendar matches your values. And can you use your values to decide whether you want to add something or whether you want to eliminate something from your very busy schedule? And so, for example, you may have kids in tons of sports and after school activities. I have a daughter who's a competitive gymnast. It takes a lot of time. And
Yeah.
so, instead of just signing her up for gymnastics or for the next meet, which is kind of like a cultural norm, instead of just doing what is normal or what everybody around me is doing, I can pause and look at my values and decide whether or not that is a worthwhile activity for me to be spending my time doing, driving her around, as well as for her to be spending her time doing. And one value that you could use to make that decision is hard work. So let's say you have a really strong value for hard work. You look at that decision through the lens of your value, and you could go either way with it, honestly. Like you could look at it and say, I really value how she's learning to work hard at the gym. She's pushing herself. She's exerting in incredible ways. And this is worth it to me to fit this in, to drive. And it just sort of takes the resentment out of it because you're no longer just doing it because your daughter wants you to or because you should. You're doing it
Mhm.
because you value hard work and you can see how this aligns with that. But you might also look at it and think, I really value hard work, and gymnastics is taking so much time that she's not able to contribute in her home. And I want her to learn how to work hard here. And I want there to be more white space in our schedule and more opportunities to work hard as a family. And so for that reason, I'm going to take her out of gymnastics. So same value could lead to different decisions just based on what feels right in your soul when you think about how can I actually live out this value while looking at my calendar and my schedule. So it just becomes a lens that makes it
Mhm.
easier to decide what deserves to be on your calendar and what doesn't.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Like, it was the biggest kind of mic drop for me when you said that, about gymnastics, because my daughter was a competitive dancer, and
Mm,
I could see, like, it was causing her a lot of strife, especially the girls that she was around in there,
mm,
and so we made the decision to stop competitive dance, and it was because of, I believe, this value I have about relationships. Like, your
mm.
relationship should sustain you, and, like, people should be kind, and it it really helps cement a decision that I was uncomfortable making, or I thought, like, she should just push harder, or she should work through it. I love this. I love this whole way of thinking about values.
Let's take a quick break to thank this episode's sponsors. This podcast is sponsored by Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. My family is getting ready for back to school, and I am most excited about getting back into a more predictable routine. After a very busy summer, I would like to recommit to taking better care of my body, including going for a walk most days, doing some simple strength training, and eating more regular, nourishing meals. I love utilizing meal services like Green Chef to take the guesswork out of what we're going to eat for dinner and how we're going to get it on the table. They include everything you need to make convenient, wholesome, and delicious meals delivered directly to your doorstep. With Green Chef, you now have the option to double your portion of protein or veggies, or to swap to a plant based protein like organic tofu. If, like me, you're interested in prioritizing your health this fall, Green Chef can help with 2 times the support. First, access to Green Chef's healthiest menu ever, and second, access to thousands of top rated gyms and fitness studios worldwide from ClassPass. For a limited time, new Green Chef subscribers will also receive 50 free credits to use at ClassPass, about a month's worth of membership. Go to greenchef.com/3in30class for 50% off your first box, plus 50 free credits with ClassPass. That's code 3in30class at greenchef.com/3in30class to get 50% off your first box, plus 50 free ClassPass credits. Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Do you have self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day at the gym or a standing lunch date with a friend. For me, I get momentum when I prioritize daily walks and journal writing. But then I have a busy week with meetings, a big deadline, or lots of appointments and activities for the kids, and I'm not doing the things that feel good for my soul. Seemingly all of a sudden, I feel a little irritable, burned out, and then sometimes I'm spiraling and questioning everything in my life. Please tell me that's not just me. This is why therapy appointments have been a vital form of self-care for me. Whether I'm in a funk or if there are bigger life events that I'm processing, I'm so grateful to have the help of a trained counselor. If you're thinking of trying therapy, I suggest BetterHelp. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Start by filling out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/3in30 today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/3in30.
Your second takeaway, you say that values can help you make decisions. How can that
Yes.
be?
And that, I mean, that is, these takeaways really sort of bleed into each other. You just heard
Mhm.
how I used values to make the decision about gymnastics, but it can help you to make any decision because I don't know about you, but that's probably the heaviest, biggest part of my mental load as a mom is all of the decisions that need to be
Mhm.
made all the time.
Mhm.
And when you have no framework for how you're going to make the decisions, it can feel even more daunting. And when you have no constraints really, and it's just wide open, like that's really hard to decide and to commit to the decision that you're making. And so values can give you a sort of framework to bring the decision in and make it a little more straightforward as you're making it. A great example from one of the women in my Self Assured Motherhood program that I loved is she told me that she decided on the more expensive flooring in her renovation because of her value of beauty.
Mm.
And she said, I had gone back and forth and I felt bad for wanting the more expensive flooring. I thought that's so impractical. Why, I sort of shamed myself for it. And this decision had just been weighing on her. And when she sat down and looked at her values, she decided it's okay that I really want this space to be beautiful. And this is the flooring I want. And I'm going to go with it. And so you could even use your values when you're making decisions about things like how you spend your money, your home decor. Like, there's so many ways once you start looking at decisions through the lens of values, there's so many ways that they can apply. Another example for family life is I have a friend who was deciding whether or not to sign her children up for a Chinese like dual immersion program. And her mother is from Hong Kong. So there's heritage there. And she really values heritage. And she wanted her kids to be able to speak the language that their grandma speaks. But this program was like it was like a couple hour drive that they'd have to do every single Saturday each way. And so she had to sit down and weigh her values because that's the thing is sometimes your values compete. So she did have a really strong value for heritage, but she also had a really strong value for slow connected family time. And
Mm.
she kind of had to decide which value was going to be more important in that specific decision. And if she had decided to do the dual immersion program, then she would have had her reason behind it. So every Saturday when they're driving, she's not mad at herself, thinking this is so dumb. She's thinking, I made a values based decision and this is hard, but we're doing it because heritage really matters to me. In the end, she decided not to sign them up and to do the slow connected family time instead, and to try to find a different way for them to start to learn the language of their grandmother that wasn't so intrusive on their family time. Either
Mm.
decision would have been fine, but the values make it so that the decision is more straightforward and you can more fully commit and own the decision instead of wondering if you made the right one.
I love that because I hear a lot of women go back and forth in decisions and they say, I just want to make the best decision. And this totally takes the best out of consideration. It's really weighing one against the other and figuring out which one will give you more of the life you want, more of the life
Mm,
you desire.
yeah.
And it
It
eliminates some of the guilt
yeah,
too for
for
picking
sure.
one over the other.
And it
And you have a
clarifies why, like, some a different woman might make a totally different decision from you,
Mhm.
and, like, you don't need to judge them. You can just
Yeah.
think, "She has her values and I have mine, and she really values this, and she's willing to drive her kids several hours to go to this dual immersion program, and that's not what I decided to do, but that doesn't make me lame. It doesn't make her lame. It just is we have different values, and we make different decisions for our families based on those values."
Yes. And also just like considering that values play such a strong role in it because a lot of times when I see parents doing other things for their kids, like say like the traveling softball leagues, and they're going all over the city every
Mhm.
weekend, they never have any free time. Whereas I would maybe judge myself for not giving that to my kids and giving them
Mhm.
that experience. Instead, I could just consider, you know what? Maybe either they have different values than me, or like they seem really stressed out and resentful about this softball thing. Maybe they haven't even defined their values and they're kind of
Mhm.
just reacting to what everyone else is doing. And it
Mhm.
gives you a
Yeah.
totally different perspective.
Yes, definitely.
Now, how can values help with the mom guilt? Because as no guilt mom, it's heavy in the
Mm.
mom guilt over here.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think that knowing your values helps you to understand yourself better so that you can stop feeling guilty and start really owning who you are. And a personal example I have of that, you were speaking my language earlier, JoAnn, when you said you value significance, because I think I'm very similar. My top value, my number one value is contribution. But I didn't realize that. I had never verbalized or articulated that until the last couple of years. So early in my motherhood, like you mentioned in my introduction, my son is adopted, my oldest is adopted, my daughter was conceived through IVF. So I went through a lot of years of infertility, and I was a high school English teacher at the time and loved that career. I hadn't articulated my values back then, but I think it's because I felt such a sense of contribution every single day. Like I could
Mhm.
see the difference I was making. I could see the light bulbs lighting up as my students were learning how to write thesis statements. I could see the progress they were making. And it just felt really good to end every
Mhm.
day with that sense of accomplishment and contribution. But when my babies were born, after having fought for them so hard, I was pretty convinced that I just wanted to be a stay at home mom and to enjoy every minute with them. And so I gave up my career and started staying home. And I was miserable. I was
Mhm. I
miserable.
can
I
identify. Yeah.
like these
Mhm.
long, long days. And I couldn't figure out why I was so unhappy. And I loaded the mom guilt on myself. A good mom would be loving this. How dare you
Those are
not
the things to say.
appreciate
Yeah.
every moment with these babies you fought so hard for? Why are you so unhappy? Get it together. This is not that hard. These were the kind of internal thoughts I had. Well, now looking back on it, now that I know my values, of course I wasn't happy. Like I went from this very obvious contribution day in and day out to this less obvious contribution of being
Mhm.
home with these babies. And of course, my contribution in my home is incredibly important. So I'm not downplaying that, but I am somebody that needs that sort of bigger feeling of contribution, that I can see it making a difference, that I can see it reaching a bigger group of people. And it just felt very unfulfilling for me to be home with my kids solely and fully. And so I
Mhm.
wish that I would have understood my values more, because I think I would have lightened up on myself a little bit, and some of that shame-filled self-talk would have I could have combated that more if I could have just said, "Of course this is hard for you. You have a really high value for contribution, and it really feels like you didn't contribute very much today. So let's reframe. First of all, what did you contribute today? Even if it's not this bright, flashy thing, like let's honor what you did contribute. And also, let's start finding ways for you to feel that sense of accomplishment and contribution and get involved in some things. or maybe consider going back to work, whatever it might be. It just would have been a more self compassionate inner voice and conversation had I been aware of and articulated my values at that time.
Yes, and, like, giving yourself permission to have those values. I
Yes.
feel like I was in the same spot you were. I stopped teaching when my son was born to stay home full time, and not more than 9 months later, I started my blog
Yeah.
because I needed that sense of significance and contribution. It's
Yeah.
lonely. It's lonely
And
for
I
us
did
significant
feel
needing
like I
people.
felt a lot of guilt and shame about feeling that way. And the
Mm.
other thing that I want to say here is there's other women who absolutely love being stay at home moms, and that is wonderful. And they
Yeah.
probably have deeper values for other things that make that role incredibly fulfilling for them. So there's not any best value, there's not any like right way to do it. I really believe that values are with us our whole lives. And so it's more of an uncovering of your values than like a deciding your values. I kind of think you don't get to decide. Like
Mm.
you were
Mm.
born this way, you were wired this way. So there's no point in feeling guilty about it if you're not naturally drawn to certain things and you are drawn to others. This is how you came. And now, like, figure out how to build a life that works with the values that are deeply a part of you and always have been, whether or not you were even consciously aware of that.
That is the best way to think about it, the best, because there's no changing how you were born.
Yeah.
Now, I know a question on so many people's minds is how do you even find these values?
Yeah. And I mean, that was a great segue actually, because I think the first thing you do in order to uncover your values is you think about what you were like as a child.
Mm.
A lot of the seeds of your values will have been with you your whole life. So, and as part of this presentation, I'm going to give you access to a workbook that I give to the women who take my Self Assured Motherhood program that will actually walk you through how to uncover your values. And the first half of that is looking back and looking at your childhood and thinking about things like, what did I really enjoy doing as a child? What really broke my heart as a child or made me upset or sad or angry? Like those are the clues of what you valued then that you probably still value today that has always been with you. For example, one thing that was I remember from a child is just how sad I felt for kids who like sat alone in the lunchroom. And
Mm.
I would notice. And now that I'm an adult, I realize that not all children are looking around and noticing the kids that are sitting alone and trying to like befriend them. That was a unique thing about me. I really worried about people that didn't seem like they were doing okay or didn't seem like they were thriving. Now I
Mhm.
know as an adult I have a really deep value for compassion. And so that was with me from childhood. So what did you love to do? What lit you up as a kid? A lot of that will be the seeds of figuring out what your values are. So that's the first half, is thinking about yourself as a child. And then the second half is to actually look at a list of values. You can find lots of them online. I have a bunch in my workbook, and actually sort of doing a value sort where you just go through the list. Sometimes I have women actually cut them out into little strips and sort them into piles that are like not important to me, most important to me. And you kind of start putting them in piles and and then you'll take your middle pile, important to me, and you'll do another sort and say, does it need to go in most important or does it stay there? And you just sort of narrow down, and different words will spark joy or spark interest for you more than other words, even if they're really similar. Like I think the words significance and contribution are quite similar,
They
that
are quite similar.
and
Mhm.
so you kind of like play with it and you're like, is it significance or is it contribution? And you can kind of let it simmer. You're not like going to sit down and in 30 minutes define your five values and like that's it. You have to tattoo them on your arm for the rest of your life. Like this is totally flexible where you can start this process, get like a little working list, and then over time, maybe start to shift the words to fit you more. But that's really the two-part process that I recommend to women is looking back at their childhood first so that you're looking inward and getting an idea of who you are, and then looking at a list of values and sorting and deciding which words best represent what you really care about.
Yes, and I love that you have the workbook too available for people. Rachel, what do you want people to do right now?
What I want you to do right now is to start finding the values, because until you find them, you can't use them in these different ways we talked about, making decisions and, combating your mom guilt. So you have to find them first. So download the workbook and fill out the questions about your childhood and start sorting into those piles. And this is going to be a key for you into lightening your mental load over time, over the next few weeks and months, as you really figure out what those values are.
That is awesome. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of these great things about values. It has given me such things to think about. And even like, I want to go through this exercise with my daughter who's having a
Mm,
hard time making a decision right now about her course load in high school. I think values could
mm,
really, really help with that. So thank
yes.
you again.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
I enjoyed that conversation with JoAnn so much. I always love talking about values. And as I mentioned in the interview, this is the very first unit in my Self Assured Motherhood or SAM program because I believe it is that foundational to enjoying your motherhood. So if you want to dive deep into knowing your values, you can download the values exercise that I give to my SAM sisters by going to 3and30podcast.com/values. And of course, this conversation with JoAnn was just the tip of the iceberg of what I teach about values in SAM. So if this piqued your interest, be sure to get on the waitlist to be notified when the program opens for enrollment in September. Get on that waitlist by going to 3and30podcast.com/SAM. Now let's recap my 3 takeaways on how knowing your values can help lighten your mental load. First, knowing your values will help you figure out what to delete and delegate from an overfull schedule. When you view your schedule through a values lens, you can see if an activity doesn't fit, needs to be tweaked, or can be delegated to someone else. When you feel overwhelmed with your schedule, you can sit down, look at your calendar, and ask yourself what fits your values and what doesn't. There is a huge mental relief when you know everything on your calendar aligns with what matters most to you. Second, knowing your values can help you make decisions. Decisions are a huge part of the mental load of mothers, and they can feel even more daunting when there are no clear criteria for making them. Knowing your values gives you a framework to help you with every decision. This can help you decide what sports to put your kids in, how to spend your money, what next steps to take with schooling and career, and even how to decorate your home. When you make a decision based on your values, it's more straightforward and you can commit to it more easily, which makes the mental load so much lighter. And third and finally, knowing your values can help you understand yourself better so you can let go of mom guilt. As you come to know yourself and what you value, you can better understand why you're struggling with certain situations or feel drawn to certain things. You can have compassion for all of your feelings as you walk yourself through how to meet your needs. Mom guilt often comes from all of the shoulds that get heaped on us, and knowing your values helps you let go of the shoulds and simply be you. I hope these takeaways have given you something to think about as you go through your week. Be sure to grab that free values workbook if you'd like to dive in deeper. And please know that I'm rooting for you as you get to know yourself on this deeper level. I'm here for you, I'm cheering you on, and I hope you have a beautiful week with your family.